All right, welcome back to GTMN.FM. This is Feb 22nd. We're a little bit late on recording it this week, but I have some fun stories from my trip to Truckee, Tahoe. I was shoveling snow for 2.5 hours on Thursday morning, trying to get my car out of the snow. You literally couldn't see it. It was just covered the whole way. And this is my first time in like this proper snow weather. So I didn't know that you're supposed to shovel every day. I'm like, I'll figure it out on the last day. And
Oh
it
my
was a
god.
mess. Oh my God. Yes, it
Okay,
was
okay, so
absolutely a mess.
so Pranab, imagine that all that happened, and then at the end, before you've snow shoveled, sleet comes along and freezes all the snow in place, and it becomes ice. Imagine
Oh
that
my
situation
God.
for a second, and that's what happened out here for the last month.
Oh no, I cannot imagine that. That sounds horrible.
Yeah, they've had
It was
like this
actually, yeah.
This this whole season has been quite strange, at least on the East Coast, but I think also on the West Coast, and it confirms, what we already know about the science of climate change, which is that the extremes are getting worse, right? So we're just seeing like wildly drastic weather. So you're seeing like big snowstorms and then lots of dry spots. And on the East Coast, you have these really, really insanely cooled winters with lots of snow. But then like yesterday, for example, it was 57 degrees out.
Whoa. That is a wild swing.
It was
And
amazing.
you were in San Francisco while I was in Truckee, so we didn't get a chance to catch up in person. But how was your trip?
Oh my gosh, it was great. The thing I love about San Francisco is there's so much energy when you're there. And like a couple of things that I think have changed because I lived just in the South Bay, but I spent a lot of time in San Francisco because I was at Branch. And I feel like some things that have changed. One is the Waymos everywhere are great. Although I found out accidentally I had hit this button in Waymo and I guess I switched to accessibility mode and all of my rides were $5 and I kept getting the accessibility van, and finally at the end of the trip, I was like, "What? Why do I keep getting the accessibility van?" And it was because I had hit this button that was accessibility on accident, I
Oh.
swear. But those rides were only $5, so I feel like I don't know.
Oh
That
my
seems a little
god,
bit of a
that's a
hack,
little loophole.
like
That is interesting.
the
Okay.
hack I didn't want to find out. And then there was so much energy. I felt like walking around. I saw a couple people that I knew just on the streets, which was amazing. I laughed so thoroughly. I was in at least two blue bottles because there's so many blue bottles where you just hear founders talking about their startups. And I was laughing. I mean, the funniest one is just like the number of times founders think that they need a chief of staff when actually they just need to get their calendar organized, you know?
The chief of staff, I mean, yes. Okay, I'm not even gonna comment because I don't have a chief of staff. I've thought about if I need somebody like that, and I have an admin, a virtual assistant, who has been amazing at just organizing my calendar and sort of keeping me organized, and she was an absolute lifesaver because okay,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
a fun one.
She's amazing.
So on Thursday, I'm supposed to check out from the accommodation that I'm at. My kids are skiing. I'm shoveling snow. And then I realize all the roads are closed. So I can't actually drive back home. And I'm like, okay, shit, what do I do? So I call Asunta. She finds me a hotel for the night at an exorbitant price, but it's like everything is fully booked. So I finally like get to the hotel and like for situations like those, it's just very helpful to have a support system. Otherwise, I would have been panicking. I don't know what I would have done. I mean, maybe I would
Well,
have used
I,
ChatGPT or Claude to find myself a hotel, but yeah.
Okay, so I have strong opinions about this. One is I think a chief of staff or an EA can only make you more effective and more productive if you are an effective and productive person. If you're not an effective and productive person, I think people use EAs and chiefs of staff to try to like make them more productive when they haven't done the work to figure out how to
Fair.
be effective in the first place. So it's like if you're an ineffective leader, ineffective executive who can't organize their staff, who doesn't know how to set a meeting, who doesn't know how to lead, your chief of staff is not going to replace you as a leader. They're only going
Yeah.
to make you a better version of yourself. So I always like to tell founders, like, look, there's nothing wrong with a chief of staff or even an EA, but like you have to know if you can do the work first and if you're replacing for a skill that you don't have, or if you're replacing for a skill that you need to go learn first. And in your example, it's like, you know how to book a hotel, you know how to get on the internet and find a place, but you got a Snowball show, your kids are there. You probably want to have a call with me because I'm harassing you. So it's like, how do you divide your time to be able to do all the things you need to do? That's where a chief of staff or an EA can be really, really effective. And I actually find the difference between an EA and a chief of staff that's so remarkable is a chief of staff kind of can do a lot of the stuff that an EA can do, but I actually think that they help organize your staff members in the types of way that you
Yes.
wish you could, but you're too busy to. So for example, if as you're growing Paramark, you're really good at managing your different exec stakeholders, but then the needs of the business continue to expand and you don't have that kind of time anymore to keep managing them the way that you want. That's where chief of staff can be really, really great in continuing the spirit and culture of what you've built without you suffering, right? And this is what I think a lot of really great founders do is they build the culture themselves. And then as the business gets even bigger, they're allowed to take some of that allowance that a chief of staff provides. But, all the time I see founders that are like, oh, I need a chief of staff, but they're really like trying to hire a head of ops. I'm like, just
Yeah.
go either hire head of ops, but like figure out how to lead your team first.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, I like
rant
it.
over,
I like it.
rant over.
No, that's great. That's great. And all right, so lots to catch up on, and I just printed out all of the research for this episode,
Whoa,
and
are you gonna
then
do can you do the stack thing real quick?
yeah, there we go, exactly, right there,
Oh,
boom.
perfect.
Yeah. Um, and then this morning, or I don't know when I noticed it, but on my X feed, on my LinkedIn feed, all I see is Manus. Have you heard about Manus? And they got bought by Meta, like, and what's happening now? Okay,
I
so
know very
here,
little. I just know that it happened, but I haven't done the research yet. So tell me.
so Meta bought Manus AI for something like $2 billion or something like that. I don't know what the
Knew that.
exact
Yeah.
number is. And Manus just launched over, I think it was yesterday or the day before, but they came out and said that we have built a Meta Ads Manager integration into Manus. And if you know anything about LinkedIn and X, there's a whole bunch of like e-commerce media buyers who are just, obsessed with automating everything. And I get why. And they're just going nuts about how amazing this thing is. And, so that was an interesting sort of evolution. And what I'm seeing here is Meta going all in, and Mark Zuckerberg even said that by the end of 2026, I think he said 2026, he envisions automating all media buying on Meta. Now, that might be an extreme point of view, and maybe what he means by automate is okay, you have a Manus agent that's doing it for you, but just a pretty big piece of news if you're a media buyer, if you're a Meta media buyer, which is obviously sort of a significant portion of all media buying that happens on the internet. So I haven't played around with it, but big moves, and I expect like lots of people to have points of views in the next week or so.
Oh
So
yeah.
I don't know what you think about it. Yeah.
I want to figure out how it works. A conversation that came up very often in my trip out west was the idea of all marketing agency actions being automated. We're seeing this happen. It's just happening in different parts of the ecosystem, but the one that people most know about is AEO, SEO, and content, right? Like there are a lot of agencies now that will help you write content, Pranav. And as a founder CEO, you can have a content strategy for LinkedIn and X and Reddit. And that used to be somebody's job. It used to be sometimes even an agency's job. You'd hire a content writer or a content agency to write on your behalf, and that would kind of like fill the hole in the content parts of your marketing team. And then we saw it happen with SEO and AEO. I'm saying SEO and AEO. People are going to debate that and say it's separate. I think AEO is becoming SEO and vice versa. We'll see that happen over the next few years. We talked about that in a recent episode. So that's another piece of the marketing team that's being outsourced. So this kind of is now entering performance marketing, right? What if, in the beginning, maybe you can do programmatic and you can do media buying with the help of an agent, but then what's to stop you from spinning up an actual agent to do all of it for you?
Yep.
And so I think this is just going to continue. We're going to see more parts of the marketing team split into agents in the same way they were seeing parts of the software engineering team split into agents.
Yeah. And, a counter opinion on this, which was I follow this guy, David Herman. He is awesome.
Mhm.
He shares a lot of interesting stuff. He's kind of like an unknown quantity, but a known quantity. So very under the radar. Like he's not big about shilling his stuff, but he's been doing media buying for some of the best sort of consumer brands for the last like ten years.
Wow.
And what he said was really interesting. So I'm just going to put this up on the screen and you can just kind of read this on your own. I think he tweeted about it yesterday or today, or do we call it X'd about it? Oh my God. Um, but for everybody who's listening, the difference in my opinion on having Manus or any AI run your media buying always comes down to the gut reactions versus the data reactions. And so what he's saying is, hey, lots of big agencies do need to fear automation and AI, and those who deeply get the thing don't. And so what he's essentially saying is all of these AI tools and Manus and whatever are going to keep getting better, keep sort of, improving the automation and the efficiency, but the ones who know when to pivot from a particular growth tactic to a different tactic, those folks are not going to stress because if AI and agents are doing all of the automation, what is left? Where's the arbitrage? And the arbitrage is coming from that human sort of loop, human intelligence and intuition. And then he does go on to say that, hey, maybe the day that AI learns all of this and everybody loses their jobs and we all end up looking like the fat blobs and Wally, maybe that day comes, but that's a different sort of problem altogether and different sort of, reality that we would live in. So I thought this was a very balanced take, and this is coming from somebody who's done media buying for 10 years and a lot of it on Meta. So it's interesting to see how this is going to evolve in the next like 6 to 9 months, but it's just a crazy time to be alive.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually his point is valid and hilarious. And I think like that's what's kind of creeping into the intellectual conversation behind all this. I mean, Elon talks about this, Sam talks about this, Sam Altman. Like if AI becomes so advanced that it eliminates the need for jobs, then can you create a world of prosperity where people can actually live? But to be honest, like in a democracy like the United States that's driven by capitalism, I don't see that ever really happening. I think even if you got to just as a theoretical, you get a government stipend for basic needs, there's going to be people out there who are more ambitious than the basic needs. They're going to want to achieve and create great things. And so, yeah, I'm just not convinced that we'll all be blobs at least in our lifetime, but maybe in a lifetime. But the thing that I definitely agree with, and then we've talked about so much, is just how the storytelling and the art of creativity in marketing is actually be reemerging as maybe the most important piece of marketing. I've been watching Mad Men, and so it's like a great reminder of the importance of creativity in the ad industry when it first started, putting aside all the other stuff about Mad Men that we don't need to talk about. But it's just this idea that, there's a story behind an ad and there's a story behind your consumer and trying to figure out the right words and message to read them. It especially becomes more important as channels become oversaturated. And if they're oversaturated now with humans running them, they're going to be completely oversaturated when AI is running them. So that's also maybe part of what he's alluding to is like, okay, well, if AI takes over and is doing all media buying and is optimizing against every signal known to man, then partially this just becomes a game of like telemetry and setup and how good is your model. And you can assume that there's some limit where everybody is the same, in which case that channel is like actually saturated and is not worth pursuing anymore. So then how do you go try to find people in a different way? So yeah, I mean like I still think in our lifetime we'll never reach that point where AI for everybody will just approach this asymptote that like, everybody's getting the same performance because it's so great. I think it'll be harder and harder to be successful, which require more creative people. And as I wrote about this weekend, I think there's also something happening with marketing which is related to this, which is that, the technical side of marketing is now becoming super easy. So if you're a creative marketer, you actually have to learn the technical side of marketing to be able to deploy it. And
Yep.
if you're a technical marketer, if you don't figure out how to find and express yourself, creativity, you're gonna get left behind. And I think like he's kind of pointing to that as well, is like there's a story behind these ads, there's a story behind how you market, and that is going to increasingly become how people make decisions. And I cannot agree with that more. I'm seeing it play out right now, like in every single marketing team that I'm working with.
Makes total sense to me. Okay, another piece. Have you heard of Gary's List? Have you
Y-
have you come across this?
I have come across Gary's list.
Okay, so this is literally from Gary Tan, who I think
Yeah,
launched this just about like a week or two ago. I don't know. Like, and he has a whole manifesto.
Gary's kind of like a legend, by the way. And actually, Gary was our lead investor at Runway when I was working with Siki Chen. Um,
Nice.
and
I
now, and
love Gary. He was fantastic. I was fortunate to have his mentorship in my first startup back in 2013. And then there's a fun story. We applied to YC for Paramark, and he was our interviewer. It was a great experience. We decided not to do it for different reasons, but he has this thing called Gary's List. If you don't follow Gary's List, I would highly recommend that you do. He just posted this chart from Anthropic, which I thought was really interesting. And what it's saying is, hey, according to Anthropic's data, what are the domains where agents are getting deployed? And so they did a analysis of all the tool calls and the percentage of those tool calls that are in a software engineering sort of domain or back office automation or marketing or what have you. The main point that he's making, that Gary's making and Anthropic is making, is that 49.7% of all tool calls are actually for software engineering. And then you've got like marketing and copywriting is only like 4.4%, sales is like 4.3%, analytics is like 3%, and e-com operations is like 1.3%. So you can see that all of this massive, appetite is still to come from Anthropic's perspective, that maybe all of these will start to grow like crazy in the next 12 to 24 months, but massive opportunities for agents in all of these other fields, including obviously marketing.
God, I'd love to see this chart split by like direct Claude code, Claude co-work, and then direct API calls, because I think that would really tell the story of what's happening. Like for example, with legal, I bet that probably is actually a lot of people literally typing into the Anthropic console, like the Claude console.
Yeah.
Whereas with software, I bet the vast majority of it is Claude code. So there's also some reflection of like what is the surface area by which people are using these things. And as more of these non-technical areas of ownership adopt Claude code or co-work, will we see these things trend up? Because now it's easier to kind of use a programmatic way of attacking a problem.
Yeah. Just I was surprised to see marketing being fairly small in terms of the overall percentage. I thought
Small, but
like
still
everyone's,
the
yeah,
third biggest one, you know?
that's
Oh,
fair. That's
what is
fair.
other? Come on, guys. Other shouldn't be on
Yeah,
here. What
that's
the
just okay. So those were two things that just happened over the couple of days, right? The Manus stuff and this Anthropic report. Lots of other things are going on. It's kind of a crazy news cycle again, because I don't know if you noticed that tariffs went away and then came back.
briefly
Have you heard of this? Yeah. So
briefly went
the
away.
whole briefly went away. So the whole e-commerce world was celebrating to a large degree because the Supreme Court essentially classified the whole sort of tariff regime over the last 12 months as illegal, and essentially to shut all of that down and require sort of the Congress to do its thing. And if you do want to launch those tariffs, it needs to go through a congressional process and the legislative process. But then right after that happened, we also learned that tariffs are back because there is a workaround and there's a different sort of mechanism that the government is using. So now it's going to be 10% or 15% for the next 150 days. And then I don't know the exact sort of statute of how it works. They can pause for 15 minutes and then launch those tariffs again. So in principle, nothing changes. And what's fascinating is there's a related news article from Pinterest. Their shares plunged 20% in the latest sort of release. And they essentially talked about how the budgets have been slashed by their advertisers, directly attributing to rising import tariffs. And so this thing is hurting the economy, no matter how much like people, will try to spin it in different ways. But short term, there's a significant amount of pain, and that's very visible from at least the Pinterest, earnings. And I think it's going to impact sort of those smaller advertising platforms and smaller businesses, because if you're Meta, you just raise your prices, and where are you going to go? You have to go to Meta. But if you're a Pinterest, you don't have that sort of power. So it's an interesting sort of time again for e-commerce and advertising. It's going to be a weird year, just ups and downs again.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, we still have yet to determine what's gonna happen with all the tariffs that were ruled unconstitutional, and
Oh yeah.
that money's not coming back to us, I'll tell you that much. So, yeah, I think we just proved that the American public will put up with huge price increases and, roll over. So,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reason to be upset about what's happened. I mean, tariffs are not an effective lever. There's tons of scientific evidence that points to that. All the data right now is pointing that it's not an effective tool. It's also creating lots of global strife. So, I guess we'll just have to see what happens in November.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, moving on to a couple of other things that are happening. So, our first interaction with ChatGPT ads. So, one of our customers just got approved for ChatGPT ads. I think they're going live March 2nd. And then news also came out about Target and Williams Sonoma talking about sort of publicly. I don't know why they announced this, maybe just like a PR piece, that both of those are early partners for OpenAI for its new contextual advertising pilot. What we are seeing from our customers who have gotten approved is you have to buy at least like 200, 250K in advertising. You don't control much about how it gets deployed. So you get, as an advertiser, some guidance like, hey, it might get deployed over 2 weeks, it might get deployed over 5 weeks. There's no sort of more clarity. There's no targeting that you can do. It's just you give money to OpenAI, and OpenAI will figure out how to do the targeting based on context. And yeah, so you can't like do geos or what have you. The one thing that they have confirmed is they're going to add UTMs to everything, so you do have obviously some basic trackability of how many
Hmm.
people are coming from ChatGPT. Makes sense. And so the conversation I was having with this customer is like, how are we going to measure the 250K of spend that you're going to spend? And I'm like, don't even worry about it, because if you can't do geo targeting, there's no native conversion lift, there's no CAPI or anything like that right now. You just have to compare what you're getting from those UTM codes and what you're getting from like organic ChatGPT referrals and see if there's a big sort of difference between those two. But it's getting real, Austin. It's like it's out there.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I wouldn't even compare it to direct, right? Like one, there's so much advantage in trying a new channel that I think any CMO that was offered the opportunity to spend 250K and their company could afford it, you would be crazy not to just experiment. I mean, like literally everybody knows this. The first person to a watering hole gets all the water. So I think that it's really smart that people are trying. This answers a little bit of the question that we had talked about. How will AI agents do attribution in the future? And so it sounds like actually for now, this is a direct referral system. So, GPT is going to help you find an item or something like that, and you'll have a link and you click the link and then you go check out. What's interesting though is I can imagine that very shortly after doing this, OpenAI could release their own SDK or their own pixel that you put on their site. And that would actually allow the agent to maybe even navigate and log in to their site and to buy the item
Oh,
for you.
interesting.
So you do
Hmm.
the attribution, but you also do the checkout experience. Imagine they have a web protocol or an AI protocol. I mean, I guess you could even have an MCP for it, but let's take the example of Target. I search for something, I see that I want to buy it from Target in ChatGPT. I say, can you just buy it for me? Presuming there's some type of integration where it has my credentials, or maybe a one password integration where it can look them up. GPT is able to log in to Target. It sends the attribution directly because it's going to be coming from a server that's totally not tied to the person's account, can check out and buy the item and then just return the receipt back to the user. And I imagine that's like probably where we're going pretty soon.
And on that, great segue into another piece of news that came out. So Unilever and Google expanded a 5-year long partnership around exactly this concept of agentic commerce. And so the idea here is Google and Google's cloud division is going to help Unilever basically plug in perfectly into Google's like universal commerce protocol. That's the new thing that they talked about.
Hmm.
And it's essentially this, which is showing up in all of the Google sort of AI surfaces and then just completing the checkout right from there. Which is a very different way of how you sort of do media buying, how you track sort of conversions, and the partnerships between Google and these large brands is going to evolve from just CPCs and CPMs to actual conversions, which is like the ultimate goal that all of this is going to drive towards.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So this last week I was talking with somebody about this idea of agentic attribution. So we described the case where we're kind of in hybrid mode, where an agent is popping you out into a web browser and then you're completing checkout there. And so all it's going to do is slap the UTM codes on and hope that you check out. But what's hard about that is like you'll have the UTM codes, but if somebody comes back later and purchases, there's no click ID or session ID or something to like tie to the fact that you really came from ChatGPT. There's also a version of the world pretty soon where you have an agent and it may actually talk to another agent and you may not even be in the loop at all. You may not even be visiting the website. And as you talked about, okay, so Google will have some integration with them and they'll do it directly. What I'm getting at though is like I'm not sure yet how a third party could emerge into this ecosystem and arbitrate or police the attribution between consumer, company, and ad vendor. But this has happened like at every stage of ad attribution for the last 20 years. When you first had click attribution, you had a third party vendor that would take the click data from between them and act as an arbiter and kind of a verification system because, a company like Google obviously has it in their best interest to try to collect as many clicks as possible, and they might use a certain framing as a way to, show more attribution. So I almost imagine there is probably a really cool opportunity to build like an agentic attribution layer where, if in case one, your system or company talks directly to Google, maybe in case two, your system or agent talks to this third party who then talks to Google. And maybe the app flyers and the branches of the world try to become this, but I'd argue there's probably also an opportunity just to build a brand new company out of it. That's like, hey, all the attribution for iOS and Android and all the other things is like cool, but it's dead and dated. So let's just build a new way of doing attribution that's maybe more probabilistic, but has an agent side to it. So that's just something
Yeah.
kind of like on my mind is there will totally be a void that needs to be filled if people are just going direct to the ad providers themselves.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So talking about, completely new sort of entrance to an existing space, I came across this news which kind of blew me away. AppLovin, this is the company that does,
Oh yeah.
ads on, games and now sort of ads for e-commerce and other things. And we work with AppLovin on a bunch of customers. They tried to acquire TikTok's non-China assets. They did not make it. But Bloomberg apparently is reporting that they are going to build their own social platform. And essentially, this is sort of an ad company building a social platform because they realize they're going to run out of ad inventory on their existing sort of surfaces. So apparently they have a job posting up for building the foundation for this, new social platform. Their chief product and engineering officer talked about it on a podcast. I don't think they've officially sort of said something, but yeah, that's gonna be wild. This is a reverse vertical integration from an ad tech company moving into social media or whatever social means these days. Fascinating move. Fascinating move.
So wild. It is so wild.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like this, right? Where an advertising tech company has built an app layer in the reverse.
Yeah, exactly. To be honest, I think like maybe this is part of the meta strategy, but maybe they're trying to build one social network. If I were them, I'd be trying to build a lot of social networks because you don't know which one is going to take off. And I also
Yeah.
would argue, I'm like surprised they're not acquiring like niche pseudo marketplaces like Craigslist.
Yeah.
Like,
Actually, Austin, I just realized, well, actually, Google just did exactly that, didn't they? They were
mhm.
an ad tech company, well, search, ads, whatever. And then they launched all the Gmail and Google Workspace and Google Meet.
Well,
So you can argue
they
that,
had Google
yeah,
Plus for a while, that or whatever it was called.
yeah, yeah,
Remember the
yeah, yeah.
little
It didn't go anywhere.
social
Yeah.
network that died? Yeah. No, I think that creating a social network is hard, right? I think we're like, for example, I think we're watching Substack become a social network right now. I don't know if they'll ever be as
Yes.
big as Reddit or LinkedIn or some of these other networks, but like you can see it starting to take off. It has 35 million people on it, which is still very, very small, but it's becoming kind of like a new cultural center for writing. And so in my mind, like I almost wonder if they should just try to create like a lot of different Substacks versus one big,
Hmm.
because I think there's actually lots of micro or niche communities out there. Like you could go on Reddit, for example, and find a subreddit that could exist as a social media app for a particular community. And so I almost wonder if like the strategy is to build one social company or to build lots. And by making them targeted towards specific communities and putting a lot of robust features in them. Like, for example, I like to talk so much about the construction subreddit because I resonate deeply with a lot of the memes in there. But, like, did they pull that out as its own social media network for, like, blue collar construction workers and, like, place for them to
Interesting.
talk, place for them to meet up, place for them to share, get help, all this other stuff. You could imagine a whole business that operates as, like, a social community, which is just the subreddit in Reddit, but it doesn't even matter if it makes money. If it's cash flow neutral, who cares? It's another advertising inventory for them.
Yeah. Okay. So again, a segue into Reddit a little bit. Reddit and Sprout Social announced something
Also,
on
can we
Feb
just pause? I
20th.
love how you're shuffling the paper. You literally are, like a news anchor here. This is amazing.
I
In
am.
other news,
Yeah.
you gotta
No.
turn
No.
to the
That's exactly
camera
what.
at, north.
Exactly. Exactly. So Sprout Social and Reddit are doing a partnership to help brands monitor their AI search presence. Now, a couple of things that are interesting about this. One, did you know that Sprout Social is a public company?
I did not know that at all. That is shocking, but what's
They
their
went
stock
public in
price?
2019. don't even look. It's like it's at $7 down from like, 130 at the peak. It's
Oh
like
man,
down 80
software is just
80% or
such a
something.
good industry to invest in.
Oh my god. It's so sad. It's so sad.
Oh
But,
wow, holy moly. Yeah, down from
yep,
150? Oh my god.
yep, yep. And what I think is happening is Sprout Social is saying, "Hey, we need to become part of the whole, AEO, GEO monitoring thing," right? Because that's where a lot of the hype is these days. And Reddit has, so the idea here is like if you're using Sprout Social to monitor all of your brand on social platforms, then we're going to have this partnership with Reddit, and you can actually use that as a proxy of visibility in AI because everyone knows that Reddit is a big part of like the citations on AI. So that's like the big news that they just launched about that they announced and launched. And they're essentially trying to frame the social listening market and evolving that into an AI visibility monitoring sort of market. And hopefully the stock will do better as a result of that is I'm guessing the hope. But that was an interesting piece of news from this last week.
Yeah, I mean, this fits quite squarely into what I see as being like peak ZERP era overhype. Like there were a bunch of companies circa 2019 to 2021 who raised too much money and IPO'd at way too aggressive prices, and expectations have been dramatically reset. And then not surprising as well, like a lot of VC based software businesses never had figured out a sustainable revenue model to start with, and so now they're having to do it, and and they're suffering the consequences of it, which is, yeah, I
Which is
mean, we've
yeah,
been
I
seeing this
mean,
for the last couple of years. It's like, I think this is the spotlight on Silicon Valley, is that yes, there are some monsters out there, but there's also a lot of businesses that raised too much money and couldn't figure out sustainability.
yeah, that's exactly right. Talking about sustainability, we have some sort of interesting news on a couple of other video platforms. So Netflix, Roku, and a bunch of others. So Netflix is forecasted to capture 10% of global CTV ad spend by 2027. So just by next year.
What, Roku?
So, Netflix.
Okay,
Netflix
okay,
is forecasted to capture 10% of global CTV ad spend,
okay.
which is obviously sort of, you kind of expect that because Netflix is a large player. They're probably second only to YouTube when it comes to sort of online video or streaming or whatever you want to call it. But then Roku also announced in their latest sort of, I think they're a public company, that their video ads are growing faster than the broader OTT market, OTT meaning over the top market. And they're talking about, how essentially CTV is just continuing to crush sort of traditional, TV and linear, which has always been the case for the last like 2 or 3 years. So Roku, Netflix, Amazon is doing a big amount of work on the video DSP side. All of these platforms are growing, double digit, sometimes more than sort of, 20% year over year in terms of what's happening with CTV. So if you're not advertising, if you're not leveraging CTV, you're missing out in a big way from these platforms.
I don't agree. I'm sorry. I mean, I do agree. I could not agree more, in fact.
Yeah, it's kind of like what is old is new again. It's like everyone's just okay. So I was listening to TBPN yesterday on my drive back from Truckee,
Uh-huh.
and the TBPN guys were talking about how gaming is actually suffering. And so what they were talking about is the gaming market is kind of stagnating, and all of that attention is just going to video. And people just, want to be entertained and not be actually sort of playing a game and just like take a step back and just like, hey, feed me all the video. And that is
Becoming the fat blobs again. Back to the start of this convo.
exactly, exactly. And so that's the trend that you see here. Now they were also talking about how Roblox has apparently taken all of the growth in the gaming space compared to all the other sort of players, which is
Mm.
also fascinating. So connecting the dots here, right? Like gaming is down, media is up, which is maybe what the future holds. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think some of this too is related to like the environment that we're living in and the time and space that's occupying the world. Like gaming was up circa 2020, 2022, but that was also when COVID was happening. And there's only so much TV you can watch when you can't see your friends. And so gaming, I think, became somewhat overinflated because of the fact that it was providing an outlet for a lot of people to connect and have community when they couldn't otherwise. And now we've seen that steep drop off. We've seen COVID go away and people are connecting outside in the real world again. And so now what are they doing? They're wanting to come home to have a way to shut off their brains. And actually, I think to escape a lot of what's happening geopolitically. Um,
Mm,
and I think the point here, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. It doesn't really matter. I think the point is like this is what we talk about when we say, hey, there's a story in marketing, there's a story behind ad advertising, there's a story in creative. This is what I think will be the difference between, say, a marketer who's using AI to figure out the world and a really creative person who's trying to figure out their audience well is postulating, hey, what is actually happening? What are people doing? Why are they making the decisions that they are? Coming up with that thesis based not only in data, but also on feel, right? Because I think like this gets back to this thing that I'm still convinced of is that there's so much data out there that I don't know in the next couple years if even the best AI will have the ability to consume every possible data point and make sense of it, right? And
mm,
what it reminds me of so much, not to make everything about attribution, but we seem to be able to do this. It's like when you're doing attribution, you have like really great deterministic data about what's happening in the world. But there's this other percent, 30, 40, 60% of the world that you have no insight and availability to. So the only thing that helps you with that 40 to 60% of the world that you can't capture is intuition. And like this is kind of what I feel like is happening in marketing is like there's a reason why people are being forced to be more creative because intuition is important. So yeah, it just reminds me like my intuition behind the CTV stuff is just because of the geopolitical nature of the world. And also it's
interesting.
like never been easier to watch TV. There's so many ways to do it.
That is very true. You have like what, at least 20 different apps, right? You've got the Netflix, the Hulu, the Disney Plus, the Peacock, HBO, Apple TV, Roku TV,
You know, it'd be so nice,
Tubi.
Pranav, if they had
Yeah.
this box that you could plug into your TV and you just use something like almost like a remote and or like a controller, and you could just hit a button and it would go to all these different services
Oh
and
my god.
you could pay you could pay one company for all of these things. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Oh my god. Yes. I so okay, in the hotel that we were at this last week, I had 2 remotes, and I couldn't figure out one was a Vizio remote and one was like a cable remote. I couldn't figure out how to use the 2. It was just so freaking complicated. I'm like, I wish there was just a way for me to, stream my iPad to the screen. So, something about TV UX has just gotten really, really bad. Okay, last one before we try to close this out. There's a new patent that Meta filed. Okay, this is a little gory. AI for social media immortality. So, okay, this one's
Tell
funny,
me
okay?
more.
A newly revealed Meta patent details an AI system designed to continue a user's social media activity and persona after they pass away.
Oh my god.
Um,
Oh my god.
so
Lord save
you
us.
use the person's historical posting data, tone, and interaction history to generate authentic updates and responses. So
Oh,
you can
Pranav, here you go.
imagine,
I'll make you a deal.
yeah,
I'll let you
yeah.
use my dead words. If I get royalties that go into a trust fund for my future generations. So like I'll become I don't mind becoming just like a random dummy avatar in the sea of Facebook if I can get paid royalties on it.
I mean, I think that is kind of the intent. Imagine if you had all these synthetic AIs of real people, right, virtual
NPCs. This
avatars,
is
and they
literally
just lived
making
on.
NPCs. Can you
Oh
imagine?
my god.
They're advertising. Do you wanna sustain your family for the entire for the future? When you die, donate your all of your life's work to Facebook. Become an
Oh my
NPC.
god.
Like,
What has the world come to?
okay, not to deviate too much, but, like, it's this type of stuff, Pranav, that makes me think we're living in a simulation. Like, this is so bizarre.
Yeah. Alright. Do you think we're actually living in a simulation? I don't buy into that logic at all. Like, the world is too random for it to be simulated.
I mean I don't know, man. Like,
Like, the
the
the simulation would have to be so, like, non-determinate, like, it's so it has to have some, like, random craziness that's going on that's just constantly being injected. Like, I don't know, maybe? I don't know, I just don't buy it.
I'm gonna go watch The Matrix tonight, I'll let you know.
Yeah, there we go. That's the
Um,
call to action. Go watch The Matrix. And aliens, apparently aliens have been in the news. Have you seen what's going on with the alien stuff?
with Obama or something else?
Yeah, so Obama apparently said something about aliens, and then now the government is also saying something about we're gonna release all the alien stuff.
Oh,
It's just
it's a bunch of
mm,
hype. I mean, Obama went on, I forgot which show, but he was doing an interview and he's like he basically said very explicitly, "There's no evidence that aliens exist on this planet that he's
yeah,
aware of as president." But he believes it's pretty improbable that there's not aliens because what we know at the universe is that it's massive. And, I think, like, everybody jumped on that to be like, "Well, release the evidence."
uh,
I mean, I like, for what it's worth, like, I agree, like, the probability that there's not another life form out there that, is highly intellectual and can space travel is probably pretty much 0. But will we ever meet them? I don't know. We might destroy ourselves before that time, so we'll see.
that is also true. What a great note to end this episode on.
I know, but one thing. Let's go back for a second.
Yes,
For
yes.
for the technology to basically build what we're calling an NPC, there was like actually a Black Mirror episode about this, which was
Oh,
and
really?
actually, like, not to get too dark, but I feel like increasingly there are more things happening in the world that are basically Black Mirror episodes. Another one was where, like, you have, I think, something in your eye or your brain that can, like, record every interaction for your entire life, and then you can, like, go back and replay stuff, and that's effectively happening. That will be happening soon. We're building bigger and bigger digital libraries of our lives, and I think we talked about this last time, like that GPT or OpenAI kind of device that
Right, right,
it could
right.
be a wearable and, like, can see and hear everything for you, that basically gets us there. And yeah, it's this question of, like, if you could replay a deceased person, or even if you could create an avatar of yourself, like, think about how useful and also non-productive that would be. Like, on one hand, it would be a really great mechanism to be able to see somebody who's deceased and talk to them and have a conversation. But I think for somebody grieving, it'd be really terrible. For you, imagine you create an avatar of yourself to perhaps, entertain your kids one night or play as the CEO temporarily. Like, what are the consequences that people have to live with that? So I think we're entering some really crazy times soon.
Yeah. The pace of just all the crazy is quite high.
Yeah.
Fun
Sorry,
times.
wanted to go back, but now we can wrap it off. Now that we've
Alright.
gone to a dark place, we can end there.
I mean, I'm also, just very optimistic about what all of this stuff is helping us with. So, it's fun to talk about and rib on some of the crazy stuff out there, but, like, I just look at my personal usage and it's going up and up and up, for all things AI in my life. So, whether it's education and learning, whether it's entertainment, whether it's just, like, getting shit done, life is good.
I
Like,
know.
we're very lucky to be living in this world.
I know, and, yeah, I think that's a really good framing, and also, I think probably 100 years ago when airplanes were coming out, people were thinking the same things. Imagine what the world is gonna be like now that travel is so much faster, and I think we will perpetually be in this cycle for probably all of for human civilization, is, like, progress means change, and change is difficult to understand. So, yeah, I agree with you.
All right. Well, everybody, it was a great episode. Tune in again next week. We're a little bit delayed on this one, but we'll be back to a normal schedule and have fun. Hope you're doing something productive with AI. And if you like the show, give us a rating, give us a review, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, y'all.